Thank you, Mr. President. You are a patient man. And speaking of patience, you like to have the patience of Job, right? Something like that. So I'm going to nickname Senator Krueger and Senator Seward Jobs for the day, at least. Their fantastic work sitting through about 100 hours of formal hearings, and certainly probably hundreds of hours outside of that, deserves our respect and their gratitude for everyone's efforts. Staff on both sides, members on both sides of the aisle. I don't ever try and lose sight of that. So these things, everyone's got them. You know, everyone's playing with their iPads and their phones. A little levity for the day. I'm even going to make Senator Kennedy smile. So my mother watches all the time, right? She's a junkie like most parents are. Chantel's mom, I remember, that kind of thing. So my mother texts me when Senator Lanza was speaking. She gives me a Senator Lanza emoji with a thumbs up like he's doing a good job, but she wants you to feel better, all right? So my mom is worried about you as well, and it just shows that people are paying attention. But, you know, I had a conversation with Senator Serrano after the election and before we got back, and I called him to just chat with him, but to also congratulate him on being named chair of the Democratic Conference. Not a surprise. Very well respected internally, very well respected in the chamber. And we chatted about what roles we play. And I think it's illustrative, and it's historical to a degree. And we talked about what is the role of the loyal opposition. And we had a conversation years ago that he reminded me about because I had talked to him about this quite some time ago. So we had a refresher on that conversation, knowing what type of role you're supposed to play. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really is nothing wrong with that because, you know, you kept our feet to the fire. Sometimes you kept most of our body in the fire, but you kept our feet to the fire. And we have done that in the past. And respectfully, we're going to do it now. And we're going to do it now on behalf of the people we represent, the philosophy that we represent, the principles that we embrace. And somebody asked me the other day about Senator Stewart-Cousins. I said, I like Senator Stewart-Cousins. I respect Senator Stewart-Cousins, as I do for Senator Krueger and all the members, including the new members of the conference. But I don't have to agree. We don't have to agree on everything. If we do agree on everything, the taxpayers should really start to worry. So I think we have to, I want to acknowledge the type of roles that we play, and the diplomacy and the professionalism I love. And yeah, it's going to get heated. It's going to get crazy. We're going to point fingers at each other, which is fine. And I'm not talking about Senator DeFrancisco because he's not here anymore. And we know Senator Seward will never fulfill that role, and thank goodness. But, you know, I was listening to some of my colleagues, and I'm now here not 12 years, not 15 years, but 33 years. And 18 of those years I spent in the minority. So I get it. I get it. I spent the first 16 years of my life here in the minority. And during that time, there was two-party rule with one exception. 2009 and 2010, the Democrats were in charge completely. And the Democrats are in charge now. And you won. You're in charge. You get all the spoils of victory. But then comes the responsibility. So I listened to one of my colleagues from Manhattan say, you know, in the budget last year, there was no funding for this. And now we took care of it. And there was no funding for that. And now we took care of it. And he may well be right. And I'll take it at face value that he's right. But I do know this. Last year's budget, the governor proposed $1 billion in new taxes and fees. $1 billion in new taxes and fees, and I'm looking right at Senator Felder, because Senator Felder introduced a bill that we passed last year that everybody supported that corrected a failure of the Cuomo administration to adhere to some changes in the federal tax code. And had we not done that, that would have been between $1 billion and $1.5 billion more for taxpayers in the state of New York, all across the state, not just in Senator Hoylman's district, not just in Senator Krueger's district. So last year, there were certain things that we just didn't give the taxpayers. You're right. Last year, we didn't give many taxes. We didn't get many fees. And there were about at least $80 million in various fees, DMV fees, things that people hate. And we killed every one of them. You have decided not to do that. In our review of this budget this year, we're getting close to $2 billion in new taxes. So there is a difference, and that's fine. And we're going to highlight those differences, and as we go through the process, we're going to keep focusing on those. So what I see, and I recall Senator Stuart Cousins, Majority Leader Senator Stuart Cousins, who last year and a couple of years prior to that would get up and say, well, I see what's in here, but let me tell you what's not in here. Chantel, I listened and I learned, all right? So what I don't see, in my opinion, I don't really see anything for economic development. I don't. There's no real change. There's a couple of things in there, a database and deals and some audit stuff, but there's no tax cuts. There's nothing on tax cuts. There's nothing to address the cost of business in the state of New York. There's absolutely nothing on regulatory reform. There is nothing for small business. There's nothing innovative, even in terms of technology or social media, whatever it may be. There's nothing like that in the governor's budget, and in our estimation, there's nothing like that in this budget. Now, we completely disagree with that, and I know people are going to say afterwards, Flanagan's wrong, it's not $2 billion. But you are increasing taxes, and we're going to have a difference of opinion about how that gets done and what is the effect on people in all parts of the state of New York. Now, I listened to one of my colleagues from Western New York talking about all the laudable things that have been accomplished in this budget. And I agree with some of them, but not all of them. And the idea that somehow we were in charge for 107 years, okay, maybe it's off by a couple of years, but I'll take it. And I'll acknowledge, too, as I said, in 2009 and 2010, we did have one-party rule. And there were $14 billion in new taxes and fees, 124 new taxes and fees. You owned that. And frankly, that's part of the reason that we got back in the majority. Things like taking away rebate checks, things like the MTA payroll tax, and terms of art in Albany that people back home don't understand. As a result of that, we had to have conversations about things called the DRP. What the heck is a DRP? I don't know what the DRP is. The taxpayers don't know what it is, a deficit reduction plan, because there were big problems in the state of New York. And then we had that thing that languished for year after year after year that we had to claw back. And as somebody from Long Island, I remember very clearly when there was an increase in aid to education, we got less. When there was a cut, we got more of the cut. And there was that thing called the GEA. And nobody knew what the GEA was outside of Albany, but our taxpayers ended up learning what it was about. Some of our colleagues got elected on saying they would eliminate the GEA. So we fought back and made investments in education all along the way. And we'll have debates about what level of education funding there should be. But I do know this. Collectively, we've provided funding for the city of New York, for the North Country, for the Southern Tier, for the Mohawk Valley, for Long Island, for the Hudson Valley. And I want to single out former Assemblywoman Mayor, now Senator Mayor, the chair of the Education Committee. Probably the thing I like the most in the education component of this budget are 4201 special acts, 853s. Getting them 4% doing that, that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. I know how good I felt being able to work on that, and I know how important it is to you and to your leader. I see her shaking her head. So those are things that, we're going to keep talking about as we move along. But I think I want to focus on what are priorities. We want to talk about tax cuts. You're talking about tax increases. Maybe not full-blown, but you're still talking about them. Senator Bailey spoke about things that are not in the budget. Criminal justice reform, absolutely worthy of discussion, should be totally separate. I'll compliment the leader for making sure that the role of the legislature is maintained, that we don't give unbridled discretion and authority to the executive, because even when we don't give it, he is still trying to take it. We all know that. And by the way, I've said that to him time and time again. It's not like I'm making this up. You all understand exactly what I'm saying. All right, so if you look at things, the Assembly is talking about a gas tax. That hurts taxpayers. That hurts the driving public. And for many of my colleagues in rural communities where people commute great lengths to work, you talk about a gas tax, that's tear my rotator cuff, rip my knee apart. Then we think the energy tax is going to hurt residents as well. So an energy tax, an internet sales tax, an opioid tax. Let's face it, opioid tax, you can talk about it 100 different ways. That's a tax on somebody's prescription. Drugs are already expensive enough. It's just another tax that taxpayers have to bear that is going to make things more difficult. We clearly want to make investments. We want to be talking about a lot of different things. Now, the property tax cap came up. In the past, we have passed a New York State spending cap here because we don't want to be duplicitous. The Senate has advanced the spending cap, and we don't want to say to local governments, you got to do this, but we'll do that. We think you should have included a spending cap. And I'm disappointed that it's not in there, because if you say you want to adhere to the 2% spending cap, then there should be no trouble enacting a statutory spending cap. Now, with regard to the property tax cap being permanent, I am delighted that my colleagues have found religion. Because in the past, when we brought up the property tax cap being made permanent, there were people who debated it, and that's all well and good. But a year ago, 10 people voted no on the Democratic side. 2 years ago, 9 people voted no on the Democratic side in terms of making the property tax cap permanent. And we wanted it done, and we wanted a partner. And I'm listening to my colleagues talk about it's going to be made permanent. Well, we didn't have a partner because we didn't have the governor. I think it's the responsibility of the majority to say, in terms of this budget, we will not support any final budget that does not have the tax cap being made permanent. Because you have two legs in the chair. You have the governor, you have this House. And God knows you have the support of the members on this side of the aisle. That, to me, is incredibly strong, appropriate fiscal policy and tax relief for people all across the state of New York. And I've listened before about, well, there's no property tax cap in the city of New York. I'll be clear, I think there should be one. A lot of people disagree. That's a personal opinion, not always shared by everyone. Congestion pricing. Congestion pricing scares the hell out of me. It really does, because last year I was sitting in the room in a number of discussions on this subject, and we were talking about basic stuff. We weren't talking about it at the level it's being talked about now. What are you going to have for the black cabs? What are you going to have for the liveries? What are you going to have for the It was that in and of itself was complicated enough. My biggest fear is that it's another tax without direction. I don't think any one of us could sit here and say, okay, this is going to be $300, $400, $500 million, and by God, I know it's going right to the riding public. I know I'm going to have a clean subway car, I'm going to have a reasonable fare, and all the things that our residents want. There's nothing out there, and I haven't seen anything that would make me feel that that would be the case. But part of the issue with that is when the MTA stuff comes up and congestion pricing comes up, this is the first time I'm seeing where there's there are programs and there are dollars associated with transit for other parts of the state. I remember vividly Governor Cuomo calling me on a Sunday morning asking me to make a quote on behalf of a 5-year capital plan for the MTA, and I told him absolutely not. I would not do it until we had a 5-year plan for the entire state. Would not do it unless we addressed the transit systems in upstate New York, in every community across the state of New York. And I'm looking at him, he's not looking at me, but Joe Roback was an unbelievable soldier and pain in the neck in that regard, and rightfully so. So when we have those discussions, congestion pricing in this discussion is important, but by God, the devil in the details on that is so monumentally important. And that's going to really affect the outer boroughs as well as all of the people of the city of New York. So there we need to tread lightly and just move ahead in a proper way. So there are a number of things in the past that we had stopped. We want to make investments. We want to be advocating on behalf of the people of the state of New York that we represent. And I do know this. My job title, like everyone else in this room, I'm a senator, but I'm a state senator. Senator Stuart Cousins is a state senator. Mike Gianaris is a state senator, which means we represent the entire state, not just our own parochial area. And you know what? We're going to fight like heck for our area, and well, we should. But as we move forward, we don't agree with some of the priorities that you have, and my biggest concern, and I've watched, the governor for the first time is openly acknowledging that our taxes here in New York are too high and people are leaving. Senator Krueger gave a thoughtful explanation of her feelings on things like the pied-à-terre. Folks in that strata, I know them. God knows I'm not one of them. But you know what? I, like everyone else in this, I would aspire to be in that group. I'd love to have that kind of debate. But those people are portable. They can walk out. Yes, they should pay their fair share. But we have to be mindful of that because the out-migration from New York, it's for the person who can't afford to put gas in their car, who can't afford to pay for their home heating oil, and are using things like kerosene and electric lights that shouldn't be used the way they are. And it's also for the uber wealthy who can walk out in a second. So we want to create a structure working with everyone here, both sides of the aisle, both houses, to do good things for the people of the state of New York. I think we've demonstrated we know how to do that. Our priorities are similar in many respects, but also different. We will keep your feet to the fire. We will absolutely keep your feet to the fire, and where things are going well, we'll stand with you. But where they're not, there's not one person on this side of the aisle who will not stand up and speak out very strongly and very passionately on behalf of the people that they represent. I appreciate everyone listening. I took the time to listen to all of my colleagues, and it's always a good learning experience. Senator Stewart-Cousins, thank you for allowing me to speak before you.